This episode of the podcast is brought to you by J.D. Chapman Insurance Agency. Are you an aspiring business owner or entrepreneur looking to be part of New York's multi-billion-dollar cannabis industry? If so, the decisions you make in these early stages are imperative to your future success. And I'll tell you from personal experience that you will face risk on a daily basis. So it's important to have a comprehensive insurance program in place with a trusted, reliable partner. J.D. Chapman offers special insurance for cannabis growers, medical and adult use dispensaries, edibles manufacturers, testing labs, ancillary businesses, and more. Available coverage includes general liability, product liability, excess liability, and workers' comp. In this exciting and rapidly growing industry, it's important to have a partner you can trust. Contact J.D. Chapman today at 315-986-4062 for all your cannabis insurance needs. J.D. Chapman, from seed to sale, they have you covered.
The views and opinions expressed on this show belong solely to the hosts and their guests and do not reflect the views of any outside institutions unless explicitly stated.
What's up, everyone? My name is Steve Vanderwall, and I'm the host of Cannabis Cum Laude, a podcast devoted entirely to cannabis. This podcast will cover a full spectrum of topics, including cultivation, business, medicine, politics, culture, advocacy, and everything in between. Because let's face it, the cannabis industry is very complicated. It's robust, and it has a ton of moving parts. So it's going to be my job to help you understand it a little bit better. So tune in every week for a brand new episode. And if you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. And if you really like the show and are interested in sponsoring, please shoot me an email at logistics@cannabiscumlaude.com. Now enjoy the show. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Cannabis Cum Laude. I'm here with Gregg Prockton, founder of G-Leaf's CFO, here to talk about some things regarding cannabis taxes, cannabis financials, and some of the, the more technical stuff that maybe some people aren't thinking about as we head into licensure with the New York State rollout program. Gregg, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
So, if you wouldn't mind, discuss your background, as a financial professional and how it led you into the cannabis industry.
Sure. I've been an accountant for a better part of 30 years. I've been a CPA for just over 25 years. I've worked in a myriad of different industries with kind of the long-term goal of learning as much as I could about as many different businesses as I could. It kind of built me up to this point. Not that I saw this coming, but it kind of helps. I've been chief operating officer of a large e-commerce business. I've been the chief financial officer of a large consulting entity. And I've been on my own for probably about full-time for about the last 5 years or so. And when it came to the cannabis business industry, I've been following it for years, the effort to legalize, right? And I've been fascinated by the grassroots effort. And it wasn't, what fascinated me wasn't so much that there was a drive to profit from it. What really drew me into it was the desire to, the decriminalization piece and getting justice for those who were disproportionately targeted because of the war on drugs. As I learned more, I wanted to be more involved and see what could I use from my skill set to make an impact in that world. So I started taking some courses, some educational things through National Association of Cannabis Accountants and Tax Professionals, DOPE CFO, and then finally decided to start G-Leaf CFO with the intention of kind of having a vehicle to provide support to those individuals looking to get into the space.
Yeah, so you are the founder of G-Leaf CFO. Walk us through exactly what that is.
Well, I have actually two entities. One is the Compass Group that focuses on non-cannabis clients, and then G-Leaf CFO focuses exclusively on cannabis clients. I want to make it very clear to anybody that I'm working with that I'm committed to that space. And, how would I say it? I'm not looking, my intention was never to get into it and, kind of do my own personal dash for the cash. I wanted to be committed. I wanted to be able to have representation within the space and help out where I could.
Yeah, and the accounting and financial piece is such an important aspect of this industry, and I think more often than not kind of overlooked because people see the cannabis industry as a cash cow, and we keep hearing these phrases being tossed around, generational wealth. And while I do think that there is opportunity for that in the legal market, it isn't all rainbows and butterflies as we may seem. We know with the New York State rollout, the taxes are pretty significant. And then as we talked last week with Rosanna St. John, who actually introduced us, shout out to Rosanna, the Canna bookkeeper, we talked about 280E and really, cannabis businesses' inability to write off ordinary business expenses. So now you have these really high, tax rates on the front end, and then your inability to offset those taxes on the back end to create an effective tax rate around 60 to 70%.
Yeah, and I saw an interesting post yesterday from the founder and CEO of Blood's Goods in Massachusetts. He said when he totaled up all his taxes that he paid between federal, state, local, and payroll, it amounted to 92% of his revenues. I mean, clearly that's not a sustainable business model, right?
Not at all. And I worry because it's one of the things that isn't being talked about as much as it should. There's a lot of excitement about licensure. I'm super excited about licensure and people are getting their real estate ready and SOP and really like getting ready to do business, which I think is great. But there is I think a harsh financial reality in that it may not be as much of a cash cow, at least right now, until we see some sort of tax reform and some sort of federal descheduling where 280E is no longer in play. Yes or no, is cannabis, as big of a cash cow, as people are thinking?
I wish it was. And I think that's probably my biggest concern is there's obviously a lot of publicity and excitement around the legalization. And there's a lot of folks who see it as an opportunity. Okay, I know the plant, I know how to sell it. This is perfect for me. But the excitement, unfortunately, it's with anything we get excited about, we tend to rationalize and kind of back into it. Yeah, we can do this. All those other things aren't a big deal. But what happens is between, the tax obligation to the federal level, yes, New York State kind of backed off it, which is nice, but it still gets you up to 70% effective tax rate. If you don't hit certain numbers, sales numbers, it's hard to make any money. And then you take into consideration the other aspects of it. You look at the other states and it repeats itself over and over again that invariably in the beginning, coming out of the gate, the quality is going to be questionable. So anybody that with a card, the conditional licenses up front, it's wonderful. They have this opportunity to be first out of the gate, but the reality is they're not dealing with the highest quality product that consumers are used to. So there's a question there. Then how long before other players get into the market, which is another issue. But then the minute MSOs get into the mix, you're competing with Walmarts. And, it's not that you can't be profitable, but you really have to do a lot of homework up front and really, really pay attention. It can't be a hobby business. It can't be open in even a restaurant. I mean, you really have to pay attention and you really have to have the right team behind you.
Well, I think that's an important thing that, to talk about in terms of, due diligence and putting together a business plan and projections of like, what is the actual financial reality and feasibility of this business? Okay, great. If you can project to make $5 million a year, but if you're only taking home, 5% of that or 10% of that on top, on top of all the risk of losing a crop, on top of some, there's so much risk, inherent risk in this business outside of the financial, risk that if you don't have the right team and B, really do your projections in a reasonable way, people, may find themselves in a tough spot in the future. So what are some things that entrepreneurs need to, consider when doing business plans and when doing projections in anticipation of entering the market? What are some of the things that they need to be thinking about?
You hit it right out of the gate is your team. If you don't, it's imperative to pick an accountant, an attorney, anybody in the professional world, insurance agent who knows the space, who can, who's looking to help and not try to just make money on their behalf. You're going to have accountants out there who are going to say, "Well, I'm familiar with the space, and well, that 280E, we can work around that." Well, no, there is no workaround. Your best case is you're compliant, and you may be able to increase the amount that you can deduct, but the reality is it has to be legit. There is no way around it. There is no workaround. So a team is critical, and just because you've had an attorney and maybe an accountant for the last number of years, it doesn't mean stay with them.
Yep.
It's quiz them, ask them questions, but find those people that are committed to the space, that are working in the space, that have been educated in the space, and aren't going to sell you a bill of goods for the effort to try and get your business and get some cash. Everything is overpriced in this industry. Everything. Banking, insurance particularly, but professional fees too, because people see it as an opportunity to be a money grab. So ask those questions. Ask a lot of those questions. And don't just look for the answers you're hoping to hear. Look for answers that are hard answers. The other thing with the projection side of it, you hit on it too, is that it's hard when you're excited about something. I've done this myself, and I've seen a number of my clients do it. You get excited, and it's, oh, there's no reason why we can't do $5 million in sales, and and then our cost of the product's only going to be 30 or 40% because I know a guy, and the next thing you know, you're showing ridiculous net income numbers, even with 280E. It's important to have another person look at that and say, well, what if? What if you only hit 2 million? And what I understand, the product cost is closer to 50 or 60%. So what does that look like? And then is 280E applied correctly? And looking at all those things. And so before you jump in the pool, you fully understand, geez, I need to do 4 million in sales to do this. Can I do it? It's fully educated. So if you're taking that risk, it's reasonable and not off that fantasy number of $10 million and we're going to make $2 million a year and this is the best thing in the world. Not to mention the risk aspect of it, as you brought out. I mean, you're going to be audited. New York State's going to.
It's not a matter of if; it's a matter of when.
Oh, 100%. I mean, New York State's going to do it regularly anyway, and the IRS may not get to you for a few years, but they will get to you. They've already gone on record. They've hired a number of people. So, if the IRS is making $4,700 an hour off a cannabis audit, and they only make $600 an hour off a non-cannabis audit, where are they going to focus their attention? It's going to be it's a no-brainer. So be compliant and be transparent.
Because a 280E audit, even if you think you're doing everything right, years later you get hit with a 280E audit, it could cripple you. And it could cripple you for a really long time. I have a buddy that comes from the legal market in Colorado who came from the edibles side of things, and they got hit with a 280E audit, and years later, he says, still feeling it. And
the fortunate businesses are the ones that can survive that.
Yeah.
But 280E doesn't just stop necessarily with the financial impact. If you're doing your work, or you're hired an accountant who told you, well, we can create all these sub companies and we can do all these other things to maximize expenses. First of all, the IRS is going to extend their tentacles to whatever businesses are in its economic group, and on top of that, you could possibly face jail time. This isn't open a candy store. There's significant ramifications potentially from it.
Yeah, and I think for the most part, people will try to do the right thing, and I think it could be things that you may not even be aware of the mistakes that you're making that could come back to haunt you later. So, the moral of the story is get yourself aligned with the right team, and there's tons of great accountants out there, but you need a cannabis focus and cannabis centric team because it could drastically affect your life, your business, and your future. But the good news is that there are people like you and people like Rosanna are out there who are real experts that are helping small businesses. And honestly, as a small business owner, we thank you because it's very important. But what's really what I want to dive into, what really kind of caught my attention first, and when we first met, was an article that you wrote entitled "Thinking of Opening a Dispensary." I thought it was super interesting. It really was a lot of this. It encompassed a lot of the same thoughts and feelings that I was having, as the program rolls out and the card program rolls out, and the reality of some of the, product that will be available, and, all these different things that, you have to take into consideration. I'm hoping you could take a minute and break down that article for us. And what was it that made you want to write that article?
Well, I've been helping small businesses for a number of years, kind of, and entrepreneurs who wanted to evaluate a business idea and see if it was feasible. And besides what we talked about already with people getting overexcited and overzealous with their projections, there's the reality, there's hurdles. So as I was getting into the cannabis space, the hurdles that people face in the non-canna world are nothing compared to the cannabis world. And I became concerned that there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there who, again, this excitement is driving the process for them, and they're not taking a step back to say, am I doing the right thing? And so I wanted to put something out there that was kind of directed towards future cannabis entrepreneurs, just to kind of, let's break it down and see what's involved and make sure you don't miss anything. We already talked about, picking a top-notch team. It's paramount. Then beyond that, it's prepare, and then prepare some more. You need to, it's the most obvious things, but you have an ideal location. Okay, well, are you sure that location's in a municipality that didn't opt out? Okay, that's the first step. The second step is there's traffic studies, public information, research the traffic studies, look at demographics, see what kind of flow is there, seeing what other potential dispensaries might be opening in the area if you can find that out. When you're doing your build out, solicit bids from all your contractors. Don't just assume you have a friend that does this, that knows somebody, whatever. Solicit bids. Municipalities do it, and in school districts, there's no reason why you shouldn't solicit a couple bids from a couple different people to get an idea to make sure somebody's not trying to take you. Research, this is critical, research your banking and insurance options and understand their fee structure. There's a number of non-canna friendly businesses out there. Most of them, as soon as they know you're in the cannabis world, they don't want to do business with you. Banking in particular, obviously, as everybody knows, insurance as well. And when you do find, assuming you do find a relationship in the banking world, understand the fee structure. It is prohibitively expensive, and there's a number of reasons for that, but that's a whole other conversation. And then in the insurance world, there's very few insurance companies that will insure it, and also very, very expensive, and people need to understand that. The next step then is having either prepare or have your accountant prepare financial projections. We've kind of talked about it a little bit. It's about being realistic and really understanding and breathing in the impact of 280E and what that means for you, and is it worth it for you? When you have your projections completed, build them into a business plan. And as you're going through the business plan and you prepare your business plan, taking it to somebody, an objective person that can look at it, or a few different people, and say, does this make sense? Does this pass a smell test? And just having some feedback from people that are familiar with the industry can help a great deal. But you have to have an open mind to it, and thick skin, because it can be a rough ride for people to question your assumptions. The other thing is that understanding what getting a cannabis license, dispensary license, or cultivator, or whatever, what that means, what's tied into that, what does that mean for you personally? And before you actually apply, understand what could be a tripping point. Do you have all your traffic tickets paid? Do you have any unpaid child support? It may be ridiculous, but did you return all your library books? I don't know. But the point is having all your ducks in a row, because if you're not one of a few soliciting or trying to get a license, you're one of many trying to get licenses. And as soon as New York State is reviewing these applications, they see a reason to tell somebody no. I believe they will. And at the end of the day, after you get your license, Your best chance for success is to be involved daily. This can't be a hobby. This isn't running a candy store as an example. You can't go away and you hired a good manager, so you're good. You have your life on the line with this business, and a lot can go wrong quickly. So you need to be involved daily. Secondly, you need to understand your key performance indicators, your KPIs, and be able to act quickly. If something's not quite lining up for you, if you expect something to trend a certain way, or, all of a sudden a certain strain isn't selling, or, whatever, your numbers, customers through the door, or number of customers per bud tender are going down, you need to be able to find out and know why and change quickly. If you're not on top of those things, you will get eaten alive. All it takes is one competitor, to introduce a new strain that maybe you weren't even on, it wasn't even in your radar. You need to know that. And above all else, and this is across all business lines for anybody, listen to your customers and actually follow through. If they have suggestions or ideas, follow through to build those relationships. Because once those relationships are built, they're less likely to go to somebody else because they're a little bit cheaper.
Yeah.
They're going to feel like family, especially in this industry. One thing I've seen more than any other industry I've been involved in, it is very familial. It's everybody wants to help everybody and wants everybody to succeed. So as long as you don't step on somebody's face, you're going to be fine. And the last but not least, stay fully compliant and transparent. Don't think you're going to hide something like you might have a friend at a liquor store or whatever, and they slide a couple $100 out of the drawer every other night. You can't do that. You're going to get caught, and you have to assume that whatever you do will be seen.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, there's there's an awful lot of excitement in the space right now, and I'm really concerned that entrepreneurs are going to take that excitement and skip over some of these key decisions and leave them worse off than when they started. I hate it. It could go south if people think they can get in and out quick.
Yeah, this is a very emotionally driven industry. People are very passionate. People have been, about the plant, about the criminal justice side, about the social equity side, about all this. And a lot of the time, and I say this because I was like that, right? I spent pretty much the last 6 years waiting and wishing and hoping and waiting for licensure, right? Preparing for this moment, starting in the CBD business, getting into the marketing space, like really, preparing and almost kind of being purposely blinded to the things that really mattered, right? The financial side, the taxes side, the reg side, just because all I could see was dollar signs and freedom and all this stuff. But when you take yourself out of that emotional box and you really look at the space objectively, and I say this because this is happening to me right now. It becomes less sexy, and something that I dreamt about for the last 6 years now is I'm wondering, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is it willing? Are you, I love this plant in this space and the people in it more than anybody, but from a business perspective, to enter this space thinking that you're going to get rich and you're going to get generational wealth, and not only that, but everybody's going to is going to have generational wealth. It's wrong. And I do feel like, we all want that to happen. I wish that every single card license that comes out, everybody gets rich and their families get rich. I want that more than anything. I want that for everybody. But the reality is that is not going to happen. And it's probably going to trend in the other direction, just by the nature of the difficulty of the business. So it's tough and it's challenging, and it can be a little defeating sometimes. But I do think that, what I will tell people is master your craft. If you grow bangin' flower, grow bangin' flower and stick to that. If you make the best infused gingerbread cookie, make the best gingerbread infused cookies or drinks. Because if you are a master at your craft, you will succeed. You may not make $1 billion, but you will have, you will sell out a lot of your products. Look at these craft breweries. You walk into Wegmans, and you can either get a 30-pack of Keystone Light for $14 or a 4-pack or a 6-pack of Mortalis or Other Half for $20. And, while Mortalis or Other Half isn't as big as Anheuser-Busch, they're doing pretty well. People love them. They're known nationwide. That's why I think the craft license and the micro business and the small scale, just like the craft wineries and breweries are really where I think people are going to be successful. You have lower overhead. It's just a smaller, this business is tough to do at scale. Growing really good weed at scale is challenging unless you have been doing it for a really long time. You got a dialed in environment and you got, an army of cultivation techs. It's challenging. But I do think if people really, focus on quality over quantity and, don't race to the bottom. I do feel like as soon as, it's going to be of who can sell the cheapest outdoor weed or who can sell the cheapest gummy. And the second that happens, goes to big business because economies of scale, they can fend that off. So the moral of the story is if you stick to your lane, although it does sound scary, and at times it can sound like, we're taking the wind out of your sails. But if you stay in your lane, you focus on your craft and you master your craft, you can be successful. You can be very successful in this business. But I did want to kind of talk about the card program a little bit. Rosanna and I got into it a little bit last week, kind of her opinions. I wanted to just get your opinion on, the card program. I do think that, optically it sounds good to give people who have been incarcerated a chance. I think that's great. But I think that, with what we know about how they're dealing out the real estate and how all that works, it doesn't really seem as truly equitable as it may seem. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on the card program?
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the word optics because really that's much of what this program is for New York State. It's all about the optics. They are trying to do some good things. I agree. And maybe there's not a perfect scenario, but the reality of the way the card program's set up right now, these folks are being tied into a lease with DASNY for a period of time. They're not building equity in an asset. They're not, if you take out a mortgage, every payment you make is building some equity in that property. If you borrow money to get the equipment, the same thing. No, I understand a lot of these folks may not be in a position to be able to get the loans to do it, but I think a loan situation would have been much more beneficial to maybe DASNY acquire the property and then sell it to the individual and hold the paper because a bank won't, and then they gradually build some equity. But that's not happening. So let's fast forward 5 years down the road. That person, we may have even spoken about December 31st this year, there's Kathy Hochul with, the first dispensary because it'll probably be December 31st and they'll probably have 2 strains and, there'll be lines out the door and it's a great optics and a great, marketing for New York State.
Everybody loves a good ribbon cutting ceremony.
Exactly. You can see the scissors already. They won't be gold, they'll be green.
That'd be huge too. Yeah, that'd be great.
But 5 years from now, where's that person at, right?
Yeah.
They were stuck in a lease for 5 years that they can't declare bankruptcy if their business doesn't succeed. Yes, they get their first out of the gate, but as we mentioned earlier, what's the quality of the product they're selling? And how does it compare to what's in the gray market? And how long are people going to go there before they go, okay, I've given it a shot, I've tried it 3-4 times, I like the novelty of it, but I'm going to go back to where I know I can have some quality product, and it's not any more expensive. In fact, it's probably going to be a little bit
higher quality for the same or lower price.
Right. So then, these folks get first out of the gate, and certainly there's going to be some volume here to begin with. But then all of a sudden the floodgates open and you open it up to non-social equity. And I understand they're shooting for 50-50, but then the MSOs come into play, and it's not going to be 50% of the business. It's going to be 50% of the licenses. So if you have MSOs step in and they open stores across the state, and they're effectively the Walmart, they could have 5 of them and occupy 80% of the business in the state. So social equity is going to be carving out 50% of 10%. And because the other 10% will be given to non-social equity applicants. So my point is, are we setting them up? Not we. Is New York State setting these folks up for failure because they're going to get poor product to begin with? And then, well, theoretically, I don't want to talk negatively about any of the cultivators, but in theory, when you're forced to grow something that you haven't grown before on fields that have never grown it before, how are you going to know? You don't know. And then on top of that, the floodgates open, there's more business. And then you get to the point like there's in California now west, all of a sudden there's an overflow of product. So for the cultivators, the cost is going to go down, but is it going to carry through to the dispensaries? I'm really nervous for the folks that are getting into it. That I think there's a number of them that can be successful, but it's really critical that they do everything right. And if they don't, those folks that qualify for the card license, if they fail, what happens to them? And all of a sudden, you've poked your head out from behind the rock, right? So, is there going to be any backlash, any amnesty? I know you've covered this in a previous podcast, but what about those folks that have gone on record to say, "Hey, I was in this industry basically before." They can't declare bankruptcy. They're stuck with whatever obligation they have to DASNY. What happens? I personally think, and we may have spoken about this before, but if New York State had, even if they prohibited MSOs from coming into the state, treat it like the liquor license for a liquor store. Only individuals can own a liquor license for a liquor store, and only one at a time. At least from that perspective, you're competing with somebody that theoretically is on the same level as you. You're not trying to compete with somebody that has the buying power that these large players are going to have.
Yeah, it would be great. I do know that if I can wave my magic wand, I would drastically reform the current tax structure of the space. Get rid of the THC tax. That's just nickel and diming at its best. A flat sin tax would be great, and low barriers to entry. Keep it simple. But you got a THC tax, you got your municipality tax, right? I mean, it's insane. And I understand they want to make money and there's money to be made, but what we've seen is lower barriers to entry and lower taxes yields higher revenues and more business getting in the industry. And if you cut these businesses off at the ankles before they even get started, it's going to make it really tough.
You look out west there, what California was looking to remove, reduce or eliminate, I can't remember, certain taxes to try and get, what are they saying? 80% of the market is still in the gray market.
Mm-hmm.
So their effort is, well, if we eliminate the taxes for a while, that'll get people back into the legit market. But how? If you already pushed them away, are they going to come back?
Well, that's the thing. It's like, I had talked to David Holland a couple episodes ago, and, he's a great guy, great asset to the industry, been in this business longer than I've been alive, probably damn near close. And he had put out that amnesty proposal, which offered, a really criminal and tax amnesty, double blind amnesty to legacy marketers that came to the surface. I think is a good start. But at the end of the day, the only incentive was you were going to get a license, which from a business perspective, if you've already been running in the underground, it's not a good business decision. So how can we go beyond just, hey, you get a license? What other incentives could we that really make it attractive? Not just, a license. Okay, fine. What about, maybe access to capital? Maybe you get to waive your taxes for a couple of years. Maybe, how can we possibly provide incentives to the legacy market to get them to transition? That's really, you're going to have to almost make it, if not more attractive, equally or just less attractive, to operating in the underground market. Do you have any ideas on how to do that?
Well, amnesty is a big one, right? You're again sticking your head out from behind that rock. You're putting a lot on the line. On top of that, I love the idea that, we do it for other new businesses in New York State, or we have done it for other new businesses in New York State, not so much on the retail side, although I think in some municipalities they have, where it used to have the economic development zones where you would be, you would have tax breaks for 10 years, whether it be employee tax credits or, rent credits or whatever the issue was to help you along. Again, unfortunately, it's great that New York State legalized it when it did, but the reality is, I think a lot of those benefits aren't going to happen until you get trickled down to the last few states that legalize it. And then when it's federally legal, assuming it gets there, and businesses can move and locate in different places, then you're more likely for the states to become more competitive.
Yeah.
But I think in the short term, the reality is the only ones who stand to gain from a legalization standpoint, state, local governments, and the federal, quite frankly, because you're all of a sudden going to be, let's face it, the majority, if not all, the legacy market are not filing federal returns. So you're going to put billions of dollars back in play to be taxed at the federal level. So they don't care who gets a license and who doesn't get a license, and who succeeds and who doesn't succeed. It's all about if you open a dispensary and you fail, New York State doesn't care, because somebody else with a license will just replace you. I really think that, to your earlier point, it's kind of the Walmart model, right? We're gonna sell more by selling at a lower price. Lower the taxes, you're going to increase tax revenue. I mean, there's a number of studies that have proven that to be true. Why they don't, I don't know.
Yeah, I will say that I think if Kathy Hochul was governor, 2 years before Cuomo left office, the tax structure probably would have been different, probably more favorable. It's neither here nor there, but the other side of the coin is, it's probably not going to happen right off the bat, because the state's going to want to see exactly how the program rolls out in 2 years and what are the realities of the tax revenue. We've been hearing $4 to $6 billion. Are we on par? Are we under? There is an opportunity for reform in multiple areas in this, not just tax reform, but like multiple areas. So I think, although they're trying to get it as close to perfect right off the bat, there is an opportunity to, in the future to advocate. The advocacy does not stop when the program goes legal. It really just begins. Now it's a matter of fine tuning it over the years. And hopefully, I do think that I don't necessarily know what state has done it the best. But I think that would, it's going to take a couple of years for us to really see how everything plays out. I hope for the state and for the entrepreneurs that it does crush it. I hope you make $10 billion, and I hope everybody that gets a license gets rich. I really do hope that. Whether or not that happens is TBD. But the short of it is like, we need to continue doing the advocacy. I know there's a lot of advocacy happening for the legacy growers and the legacy operators. I can only imagine the next couple of years we'll start to see tax reform, especially since we're seeing what happened in California. I mean, the truth is that's the direction that we're trending in. And we did before I got into really podcasting and anything, I was in advocacy. And one of the things that we, continued to parrot was pay attention to what's happening in California. Don't do what's happening in California. And it kind of happened, and it's a little bit frustrating. But I think at the end of the day, the fact that the legacy market will always be the guiding hand that determines the success of the legal market, the legacy market will determine what happens. And in order for the legal market to be successful, the regulators are going to have to pay really close attention and be able to, it shouldn't take 3 or 4 years to make change if the market's saying, no, we need to make this change, So TBD. I am excited. I know the last couple episodes I've come across a little grumpy and pessimistic when it comes to the industry, and I am. But I do hope that it succeeds, and I got a lot of farming buddies who are banking on it. And I do want this industry to succeed. So before we wrap up, where can people find you, and who would be, in what phase of preparation should somebody reach out to you if they needed your help?
Well, I can be found on LinkedIn, and I can be emailed at greg@gleafcfo.com. I think in the feasibility stage would be the best time to reach out, really to have those conversations, to see if it's the right place for you, to understand what level of investment's needed, where that comes from, understanding the impact of 280E, understanding how it all shakes out on financial projections, and also the potential personal impact. This space, I agree with you. I want nothing more, especially from the social equity perspective, want nothing more than these folks to succeed. And to that level, I've helped a number of individuals just walk through the process, to understand what's involved, to go through the numbers, and really grasp what path, whether they have the stomach for the path. This isn't for the squeamish, this isn't for the thin-skinned, and you really need to understand it. So the earlier you know that, the earlier they're informed and educated about that, the better off they're going to be. So anytime I can help somebody get to that process before they really start spending some money, all the better.
Earlier the better.
Exactly. So if somebody, one of your listeners is listening to this and debating whether to do, get into dispensary, get into cultivation, I'm more than happy to, share an hour conversation with somebody at no cost, just to kind of give them a perspective where things are at, so that it's not a shock to their system when they get to the point and they invest this money and they go to somebody that's going to do a license for them and they submit their application and they didn't realize they needed to have, 2 years of bank statements or, the standard, proof that you had a business that was successful, or, the silly stuff. They had an unpaid parking ticket from 10 years ago they never even gave any thought to.
Mm-hmm.
Doing those steps to make sure they have the best chance for success. And that's the biggest thing. I want nothing more than the little guy to crush it. I really have no skin in the game for the MSOs. I know they might be a necessary evil around the country, but generally speaking, I'd much rather see the craft growers, the craft dispensaries, the ones that focus on their niche. I want to see them crush it. Whether they become millionaires or 100,000aires, I don't care. As long as they're successful and happy, and more importantly, they're not cleaned out by New York State or the feds, all the better.
Yeah, and let's not forget something. You don't need to make millions of dollars to be happy, and certainly to be happy in this industry. If your whole job, is being around plants all day and good people and like-minded people, who cares if you make $20,000 a year? As long as you can pay your bills and you're happy every day, that sounds pretty damn cool. The good news is there's an opportunity to make much more than that. But also, be conscious and be, happy that we're able to operate in a legal market and be able to to do this relatively out in the open. It really is cool. It's a cool time to be alive.
I agree completely.
Well, I appreciate you coming on here and having a conversation with me. I really like getting into the technical stuff and the tech stuff and some of the the other stuff that people may not be thinking about, because it's critically important but often overlooked, especially in such an emotional and exciting time as license and program rollout. So thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and spending some time with me today. And I hope we can do it again in the future.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. And I also hope we can do it again, Steve.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I'll make sure to post your contact info, the article, and all that stuff we discussed in the show notes, so listeners have access to it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve.
Cool. Well, everybody, this has been another episode of Cannabis Cum Laude here with Gregg Prockton, founder of G-Leaf CFO. We will see you next week.
Thanks to our friends here at Rockbox Recording and Production in Rochester, New York. They are a full professional podcast and video studio designed by a radio guy for podcasters. Audio, video, voiceovers, editing, whatever. Mouth off at Rockbox at rockbox.com.
You can follow Cannabis Cum Laude on LinkedIn and all other social media platforms, as well as Cannabis. And if you'd like to help support the show, search up Cannabis Cum Laude on Patreon. And of course, all of those links are in the show notes. Thanks for watching and listening.